So the Celtics finally giving Jaylen Brown that supermax, I feel comfortable giving the Celtics an offseason right now because it feels like they're pretty much done. I don't think they're going to be able to make a play for Damian Lillard. I don't think they want James Harden. And I don't even think they'd be like a third team in a Damian Lillard trade because I don't think they want Miami or any other East Coast team getting Dame, and that just makes sense. So before I talk about kind of what the moves they did this offseason, let's talk about how their season ended because it kind of explains what their logic was going into this offseason. But obviously, they were top seed, one of the top seeds in the East. Personally, I thought they looked worse in the playoffs than a lot of people pointed out. So, like against the Hawks took them to 6 games. The Hawks were a play-in team. And then against the Sixers, God will not allow the Sixers to leave the second round, so I expect them to win that, but they did it in almost the worst way possible. Of course, they did have a strong game 7, but they did go down 3-2, and it took like a masterclass by like James Harden and Doc Rivers for the Celtics to really win that, and the Celtics were just looking very rough around the edges and inconsistent in that series. And then we get into the Eastern Conference Finals, and at this point, I thought Miami was just clearly the better team. I thought that Miami was going to win in like 6 or so. Then it ended up Miami going up 3-0, and then the Celtics lost 4-3, which was really weird. So it was kind of like, I would say the theme of this team is inconsistency, kind of since they've been doing this Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown thing. So, of course, they did make the finals last year, but the general theme is that they're always good, and they usually go to, like, the Eastern Conference Finals, it seems. I think the kind of their sense was that this, like, core that they had might have gone as far as it can go, really. Or this is kind of like their peak, like losing in the finals or making the Eastern Conference Finals. So they ended up, doing some good things, I would say, overall in this offseason. So the first thing they did is that they quote-unquote sold their soul by trading away Marcus Smart. But in return, in this like 3-team trade, they got 2 late first-round picks, and they got Kristaps Porzingis. And I don't really care like how you want to kind of like dice this up. This is clearly Kristaps Porzingis himself is better than Marcus Smart, and they get likely late first-rounders. It's just however you want to look at it, it's better. Now, I understand there are a lot of concerns about this because, people like to say Marcus Smart was the heart and soul of their team. He was very important to their defense as well. I can see that, but I don't think Marcus Smart really ever pushed the needle for them. Just with Marcus Smart, I just always felt like, his scoring and his shooting ability always just left so much left to be desired. And, he was a solid starter in the league for sure, but, Kristaps Porzingis, when healthy, is playing at, kind of like a fringe all-star level. So it's just an upgrade on paper. Now, of course, there is more to the story than that because really with Kristaps, the big question about Kristaps is his health. Now, I do believe that Kristaps can certainly play at about near all-star level. I think he's going to be taking like a small step back this year because he'll become the third option, of course. But really, the only time where he looked, I would say, like really bad, I think it was one playoffs in Dallas. I really felt like he never quite fit in Dallas. I don't think they were using him right at all. Like they just never gave him the ball because they were just so obsessed with Luka just doing literally everything imaginable for that offense, so it didn't work. But then Kristaps got traded to Washington, and he's looked good since that trade. Now, of course, he hasn't played that many games. Last year, he played about 65 games, which is, starting to get to a little bit worrying. And then the year before that, I think he played just over 50. So not consistently healthy there, and he has like his whole career has just kind of been plagued by injuries. I think he only has like one major injury though. But overall, I like this trade because, like I said, I don't think Marcus Smart really pushed the needle for the Celtics, and I feel like Kristaps Porzingis can. The risk here being is that Marcus Smart is almost always available, while Kristaps, makes you worry. Moving on after that, they kind of didn't do anything for a while. They did trade Grant Williams, because if they would have paid him $12 million, I think they would have been in the second apron, and it seems like no team wants to be in that second apron, so that's fine. They got like a few second rounders for that. I guess they can use that in the future for probably trades or something. And then they kind of just went radio silent for a while after that, and like the last big thing they really needed to do was just sign Jaylen Brown or deal him. And it was making me suspicious that they weren't doing this for like so long. There were some reports that they were just kind of like working on like small things like trade kickers. They weren't really rushing into it. So they ended up doing that, and that locks Jaylen Brown in with the Celtics for the next year. He can't be traded until I think it might be exactly a year from the day he got signed, or something. I just know he can't get traded until next offseason. This is kind of like, I call this like a necessary evil, because I don't want to go off into too much of a tangent, but I just don't feel like, the pairing of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is going to be good enough to get you to a championship unless it's like a very weak year or something. And that's because, I just have doubts about Jason Tatum being able to be like that number one guy in a championship team. And I also have some doubts about just Jaylen Brown being the number two guy in the championship team. And it's really just a consistency thing. Like we've seen certainly during the regular season that they're able to play at that level, but in the playoffs, they've both had some woes. Like for example, like in the 2022 finals, I mean, honestly, Jason Tatum got outplayed by Andrew Wiggins, who was playing like at all-star level, I suppose. And then this year in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that Jaylen Brown got outplayed by Caleb Martin. And I know that's just like one example each, but either some other examples that can be made where they're just kind of just underperforming or just being wildly inconsistent in a 7-game series. Like I know in the playoffs in one series there's going to be variance. You're going to have good games, you're going to have bad games. But with this team and the Celtics as a whole, it just feels like they're so on and off, and it's just too much for me to really feel like they can confidently win the finals. So, like, even in the Sixers series, I really feel like the Sixers lost that much harder than the Celtics won that series, right? Because Jason Tatum was just shooting the Celtics out of the game in Game 6, but, I mean, Doc Rivers was having a masterclass, and it really feels like if any other, coach was coaching the Sixers in that series, or at least playoff coach, I think the Sixers easily seal that in 6. I think that if that was the case, then people would feel way worse about this duo and the Celtics in the future, and they were able to kind of just look up and face the Sixers in the second round. And then, of course, like as a duo, they don't really complement each other whatsoever because they basically have the exact same game, and they're not some type of crazy playmaker. They're going to be taking generally the same shots, and their offenses combined just don't create any new type of offense. They're almost like their own types of things, whereas we saw with like Jokic and Murray, their two-man game was just devastating like all 4 rounds of the playoffs. But I certainly understand why they had to kind of supermax Jaylen Brown, because I think that pretty much, most other GMs would have done this, and, GMs are in love with like 6-7 wings that are able to kind of do everything, because players like that, their floors are just so high that it just feels like a good, safe bet. And Jaylen Brown has been healthy, and he's young. So I can understand why they're doing this. And also, it's very tradable. I do think that core of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum deserves another chance or two, since they kind of improved their roster with getting Kristaps Porzingis. I do definitely believe this deserves another chance or two. And then I think that Jaylen Brown can easily be traded, as we saw with like Rudy Gobert. Got traded to Minnesota. Of course, Minnesota had no idea what they're doing. But Jaylen Brown is certainly very tradable. I don't think it's not gonna be like some type of salary dump. They could get something good in return if, things fall in place correctly. So overall, I'm feeling a B grade because I feel like, they did what they needed to do, but I feel like they're just taking a lot of risk here, particularly with Kristaps' health, because I feel like if Kristaps is not healthy in the playoffs, I think this team is screwed. But as for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, keeping them as a duo is just another risk in my opinion, because it just feels like historically or in recent years, it feels like the Celtics just ends up, their playoff runs end when they end because one of those two is not on. And it just feels like too often that with these two, they're both just too on and off to really reliably rely on for the entirety of the playoffs. And I understand why they need to sign Jaylen Brown, but I just feel like I could easily see the exact same thing happening this playoffs, whether that be in the finals, whether that be in the second round, where just either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown just kind of like disappear, because we've seen that many times by now. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say, and thank y'all for watching. I guess I'll see y'all next time.